Good morning. Father Murr, Rob and I have been looking to get you on for about 2 years. We both bought Murder in the 33rd Degree 2 years ago.
Yep.
And we read our way through it, and then I think we got caught up talking about evolution, and like it was like a series we did about evolution. Then I got invited to a conference, and we just didn't get around to making sure we put the interview together. And then almost a year had gone by, and I forgot about the book. And so I saw you on Joe McClain's show the other morning, and you started to give me a little bit of hope. So I've been
isn't Joe a great guy? Isn't McClain awesome. A great guy?
Yeah,
I think he is. Yeah.
So I kind of bounce between these two places with this coming conclave, where I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit hopeful. Maybe we're going to get something good. And then the other place is like, oh no, we're in the end of the world and we're going to get the worst pope in history. So, but you were
we can't have that happen. It's already happened. That's done.
That is true. So, but it's also interesting because Rob is from Minnesota.
Yep.
And you were born in Minnesota, and I'm from New York. And you said you actually were you incardinated in New York?
Sure, I'm incardinated in New York. I was on 87th Street at St. Joseph in Yorkville, and then pastor at Our Lady of Guadalupe on 14th Street, and then pastor of St. Francis de Sales on 96th Street.
Oh, wow. Okay, so St. Francis de Sales I know. The other two I don't.
Yeah.
So what year were you ordained?
77. I'm an old man, Anthony.
Well,
I'll be 48 years ordained on the 13th of May.
See,
May 13th. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. May 13th. Wow.
Yep.
So but it's also good for guys like us to hear the perspective of somebody who's kind of been through these, because Rob and I both remember Francis's conclave. I remember very vividly Benedict's. Yeah. I don't know how because Rob's a little bit younger than me, but Rob and I both kind of grew up in the JP2 Catholic era, where it was there was an excitement that was going on in the church back then. There's a lot of converts coming in. And everybody just, it was the new springtime. We were talking about the hermeneutic of continuity and all these things.
Yes. Yeah.
So for the younger people that come in, especially because we have a lot of guys in their 20s that watch this, they probably just had conversions or came into the church under Francis. It's like a totally different way of seeing the church, and especially looking back upon it and seeing those, seeing Benedict and John Paul II in this light of like the modern traditionalists who didn't live through it. It's hard to explain to them the excitement that was going on in the church. But you were ordained in 1977, and you were in Rome for that 78 conclave, right?
Both of them.
I was in Rome for the election of John Paul I, John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, and for Pope Benedict. I was in St. Peter's Square and on all of those occasions. I'll just back up a little bit. You're starting not at the beginning, the two of you. It's not your fault. You weren't born then. But I'll tell you when the beginning was. The beginning of this sort of season of hope, of a hope that came in with the Second Vatican Council. Yeah. Now, nobody knew what the Second Vatican Council was going to be about. Nobody knew. Just that it was going to be an updating of things, generally speaking. That the church had to kind of understand that the church was in the world and had to get a little bit more with it, if you will. So we were looking for changes, exterior changes and things, right? Well, there wasn't excitement in the air. There really wasn't excitement. Kennedy was president, our first Catholic president. Pope John was sort of a, not avant-garde, but sort of a progressive thinking man. But I mean, you have to see where he was coming from when we say progressive thinking. Right? It was coming from the Middle Ages. And to be progressive thinking in the Middle Ages is not the same thing as a progressive thinker today. But it was an exciting time. The problem is that it never became more than an exciting time. And it was sort of downhill from then.
Yeah.
The excitement wore off in about 1967, 68. 1969, the new Mass came out. 1970, 1969, 1970 through the 70s, we had problems. Defections. I mean, we had 30,000 Jesuit priests in 1970. And by 1977, when I was ordained, 10,000 had left.
Wow.
Had left the priesthood. We had 500,000 nuns left the convents.
Holy cow.
And this depleted completely what the Catholic school system was in the United States. You, the two of you, as much goodwill as you have no idea what a jewel the Catholic school system was in the United States of America.
Yeah.
It was something to be copied, emulated by everyone in the world. It was fantastic. It cost me, listen to this, when I went to grade school, you know what the tuition was? We had all Dominican sisters. There was no lay people. There were no lay people teaching anything. The sisters taught 8 grades. It was $15 a year.
That's actually
and
a tragedy.
That included your books. And that was with no federal or state help. Right? So why? Because we had some fantastic women. I cannot underscore that enough. They're talking about the women's place in the church, this and the other. These women ran the church.
Yeah.
They actually did. They were the backbone of the Catholic Church in America. These pious women who gave up everything in their life to teach children to love God. Yeah. And they did an incredible job, By 1975, we had lost 500,000 of them.
Wow.
And I'm not talking to death. Just their number, the women who had left became disenchanted with their vocation and just left. And everything started going downhill from then. Now that I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom. No, because there were great spots in that too. But
what was it like to actually live through that and see those things happening? Like because we man, I kind of get I'll get a doom and gloom outlook on the way things are now, but as this whole cascade of everything falling apart is kind of in the air, all these the nuns leaving their orders and the Jesuit priests leaving, and as the craziness of the 60s dies down, then you get the new Mass at the end of the 60s, and then the 70s comes, and the fervor of the revolution starts to die down. Then that conclave comes in 1978, and you guys, the church elects John Paul I, and then within 30 days the man dies. Like, so your whole book is about that actual conclave there. So you were in Rome for both of those conclaves, right? That 30-day period.
Yes. Yeah. What? Look. The thing is this too. It's not just that we lost 10,000 Jesuits and 40,000 priests in the United States, and 500,000 nuns all over the world, and we lost our school system. Schools began closing. Churches began closing. Our universities were more secular than they were Catholic. We had to cover up crucifixes to be able to talk because we started taking federal government money, and therefore religion had to be covered up a little bit. You couldn't be as boldly Catholic. So all of these things were happening, and I'll tell you this. You remember the prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament?
Oh yeah.
Jeremiah he told the Jews that they were all going to be sold into slavery. He said, if you don't change, God is going to let you be slaves of the Egyptians. You're going to be, that's it. Well, Jeremiah sat on a rock and watched his people being led off to slavery. And he cried out to God that he wished that he had been wrong. Why can't you make me wrong? I wish I were I wish I were wrong. I wish I didn't even know this was happening, but I've been telling these people this for years. There were many of us who knew we were going in the wrong direction, but nobody was listening. It's like the momentum was so strong, it was just going on. And when you mentioned that something was wrong, people will say, no, it's going to get better. You just watch. Well, it didn't get better. It got progressively worse, right? So it was when John, well, here's the deal. In 1972, Pope Paul VI was Pope. He said, the smoke of Satan has somehow filtered through some fissure in the wall, and it has filled the sanctuary of the Lord with smoke. Everybody was taken aback by that. What in the world is he talking about? This is during a homily. Finally, he was a liberal. Finally, he was getting the idea that things weren't going right. This is the Pope. In 1974, 2 cardinals brought proof to him that some of the members of his government, the Roman Curia, at least one, actually two, were Freemasons. They were in cahoots with the Freemasons of Italy to topple the Vatican. Now this sounds absolutely, it sounds crazy. It sounds like I'm talking. I'm a conspiracy theorist. It's actually true. There are people still in prison because of that today. Right? Those who weren't killed and didn't commit suicide.
People hear Freemason now, and it sounds like oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But if you go back before the council, every single pope since like the 18th and 19th centuries were warning about this.
1730s, I think, actually.
When the first popes start warning about these secret societies and talking about how there's going to be this Freemasonic attempt to the Alta Vendita comes out, and the popes were warning emphatically about this happening. And then
they wrote encyclicals on it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We were not alive. But during the time of Pope Pius IX, he was Pope for 32 years. Imagine that. He was the longest reigning Pope. In the 1870s, there was Vatican I, the first Vatican Council, that never finished because the rebels came in and took over Rome. When the Pope died, he remained in the Vatican for the rest of his life, and he considered himself a prisoner of the Vatican. When he died, there was a battle, if you can imagine, on the bridge of the Holy Angels. If you know Rome, you know Bernini's beautiful the bridge, sacred bridge at Santi Angeli of the angels holding the instruments of passion. Anyway, they were crossing with his body to be buried in San Lorenzo. He wanted to be buried outside of the Vatican because he had spent his whole life inside the Vatican. He wanted to make a statement. So he asked to be buried in San Lorenzo, a beautiful basilica in Rome, outside the Vatican. On that bridge was a battle between the Freemasons, and thank God for the Catholic youth of Acción Católica. There was a battle that they were about to throw his body into the Tiber River.
Wow.
Take it out of the coffin and throw it into, it's incredible. These were the Freemasons. Right.
Yeah.
This is what they were up to, and their decision was they are absolutely pronounced against the Catholic Church. There's no question about it. Now in 1974, we had this problem of these cardinals bringing this to the Pope's attention. The Pope, Paul VI, called for an investigation, and he named an investigator who was Cardinal Gagnon, Edward Gagnon, a French Canadian, brilliant man, holy man, pious man. He worked for 3 years on this investigation and told the Holy Father, yes, that there were at least 2 major players who were Freemasons in the Vatican. One of them was a man by the name of Annibale Bugnini. He was the architect, if you will. I think architect is a good term for a Freemason. He was the architect of the new Mass.
Yeah.
The new Mass that you attend every Sunday or every day if you go to Mass. He was transferred out of the Vatican when that was discovered. He was transferred to Iran. Boom, given a nothing place in Iran.
This is after he already had his
Yes,
hands
this is post-destruction.
Yeah,
this is post-destruction.
So he did all the damage, and then he gets shipped off, and it's like,
this is closing the barn door after the horses have escaped, right?
Yeah.
And then what was more important was that the man who was naming all of the Catholic bishops in the world, whose name was Baggio, Baggio, first name Sebastian, was a Freemason. If you can imagine a Freemason naming your bishops. He was the one who appointed bishops all over the world. He was in charge of naming bishops.
Is it so much different than
It's incredible.
Is it so much different than Supich telling Francis who to
No.
elevate in America? It's not, right?
No.
It's the same thing. We're still seeing whether they have the actual membership in Freemasonry, like
that's
they're
right,
doing the same exact thing, right? So
I could not agree with you more.
How long had Baggio been in that
watching-
position? How long had he been naming bishops at that point?
Well, he was in that position for 12 years.
Oh.
And these were post-conciliar years. When, if you bear with me just a moment here, before the council, every bishop was the bishop of his diocese until he died, just like the Pope.
Yeah.
If the man lived to be 104, he was the bishop of his diocese. He was the bishop of Brooklyn at 103. All right.
Yeah.
Other people logically helped him run the diocese, but he didn't go anywhere. All of a sudden, Pope Paul VI published a decree saying that every man at 75 will resign, present his resignation as bishop. That's why bishops now resign at age 75. Well, no, you can be against that, you can be for it. It really doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, to what happened during that time, all of a sudden you've got all of these bishops, a huge amount of bishops who resigned because they're over 75. They were replaced by liberal, progressive bishops appointed by a Freemason, Sebastian Baggio.
Wow.
This was incredible. Yeah.
This was them taking out the old guard.
You're right. But they almost did it overnight. This is what I'm saying. It was a boom.
Yeah, they take out the old guard and they put their young revolutionaries in play. It was almost, man, this is to not see this as even from back then, because we recently heard Cardinal Mueller. I think it was last year. He was on with Raymond Arroyo, and he's like, "We are talking about a hostile takeover of the Catholic Church." But this takeover began well before the Francis pontificate. This has
it didn't start this morning.
Yeah,
it didn't start this morning. I'll tell you that. Yeah. And see, and it was easier to perform because this is now after the Second Vatican Council, after the council that's proposing change. Okay, good. So we're in this thing of change. So anyone who questioned it, well, there's something wrong with you. What are you against change? Are you against new ideas, new growth? What's the matter with you? And well, yeah, okay. So everything was geared that way. We had a papal nuncio in the United States, Jadot, Jadot. He was Belgian. He was the only son of a Belgian diamond mine owner. That's how you become a papal nuncio. Anyway, he was the one in the United States who was selecting these men, and then he would send the names to Rome to Cardinal Baggio. He wrote an article he was interviewed in Time magazine, and when he resigned, then he said the proudest thing that he had done was to name or have named 75 or 78 liberal bishops to the United States of America who were going to effect change. right? So we've been in this for a long time.
Yeah.
The two of you gentlemen, you were born after the council.
Yeah.
So you have no real point of reference. But believe me, look, the church has always had problems. The church is made up of human beings. And when you've got anything to do with human beings, you've got problems, always. But I'm telling you, it was run up until the 1960s. incredibly smooth. We were the envy of the world.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
church was growing and growing and growing, and missionary zeal. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, a missionary from the Amazon, Pope Francis was very interested in the Amazon,
I remember.
whatever his reason was. And then he brought in a pagan idol and put the pagan idol on the altar, the high altar of St. Peter's Basilica. It's incredible. I thought I was having I don't know what, not a nightmare because I was awake. It was a daymare, I guess. I couldn't believe what I was seeing or hearing. But this man was a missionary. He was an Italian priest, missionary for 40 years in the Amazon. And the Pope invited him to the opening of one of his synod talks. This man's great pride and joy was that in 40 years, he had not baptized one single person. And he was applauded. Like, what? It's incredible. So this is the confusion we're all in right now. And after this pontificate, the last one that just ended, I've never seen so much confusion in my life. Actually, it's not confusion because I, in particular, am not confused.
Mm-hmm.
I see very clearly what's happening. I get it. We are in a war. That's what we're in a dilemma, right? But I'm not confused about it because I happen to know right from wrong. And I happen to know my catechism since I was a boy in school very well. I know what the church teaches. We're in crisis because the church wanted to be in crisis for some reason. She put herself in crisis. And I'm saying you can figure it out for yourselves, I think. The crisis, by the way, I'll end with this. 5 days ago, 10 days ago, whatever it was, 3 lodges of the Masonic Brotherhood in Europe, one from France, 2 in Italy, applauded Pope Francis. This was the kind of Pope we've been waiting for years.
Yeah. It was
when you're applauded by the Freemasons,
it was the accomplishment.
You're not. It's something wrong.
The accomplishment of the Alta Vendita through Francis. He was the ultimate goal of the Alta Vendita, and it's interesting to watch people kind of try to sugarcoat the past 12 years.
Yes,
but they were very painful for faithful Catholics because all the things you're talking about. What happened is you had your Archbishop Lefebvre, who really was in shock when he saw the Assisi meetings, the way we were when we saw the Pachamama incident. But when he saw Assisi, he was in shock like we were. But the rest of the world thought nothing of it. And they just looked at, like ecumenism. Like I remember not even hearing about the Assisi meetings until 2017. For us to the conversation that takes place after the council, it's not about traditional liturgy and things like that. They wind up changing the Overton window so much that the conversation then becomes between the communio guys and the concilium guys, and nobody's even talking about like a return to tradition at that point. They just shifted the Overton window so much that it's interesting to watch 60 years later, 50 years, the conversation about tradition doesn't really come back until the Francis pontificate. Like under Francis, then we start going, wait a minute, maybe this whole council was a mistake. Maybe we have to, but it took a very long time to get there.
Yes, and let me just be clear on this. I am not of the opinion that the council was a mistake. Okay, I've read the council documents. I've studied the council documents. There are many cases in those documents where clarification is needed.
Yeah.
Right. But that's all. Clarification was needed. This was what Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope Benedict was trying to do little by little, clarifying these ambiguous points. Ambiguity was the language of the council because you had the left coming in and they were trying to get the right, they were trying to pull the right with them. And they could do that by using ambiguity. And they say, what do you mean? Well, what do you think I mean? Oh, well, that's it. Then we both believe the same thing, right? Until we didn't. And it was clear. So that ambiguity had to be cleared up. The thing with Assisi, it was shocking because those of us who were educated as Catholics knew that that was wrong. You do not pray with heathens. You don't do that. You don't hate heathens. You don't hate the pagans. That's not the point. You love them. They're human beings. You respect them. But you don't go. I mean, the very idea that the Holy Father, the Pope of Rome, the Vicar of Christ on earth, is praying with an American Indian who's praying to the great toe.
Yeah.
This is mind-boggling. Or the great thumb. I don't know if it was a toe or a thumb. What are you talking about? This is crazy. But you're putting everything on the same level. But and this is what Francis just did. All religions are the same. He said the same thing. This is heresy. All religions are not the same. If you believe that all religions are the same, you don't belong in the Catholic Church.
Yep.
But because
we have one religion, we have one founder who's Christ. That's it.
When you actually
lived
that experience, when you actually watched that happen, were you alarmed yourself? Because I was too young. I had no idea that even happened. So
yes, we were alarmed. Many of us were alarmed, Anthony. We were alarmed. But at the same time, the world around us is saying, isn't this wonderful?
Yeah.
They're all getting along. Isn't that beautiful? All of these religions are finally getting along. Who wanted that all along? The Freemasons.
Yeah.
This is what they want. All religions are the same. They're not different. They're all praying to the same God. No, we're not. No, we're not. We have a Trinity, a triune God. God has revealed his own nature, and we hold that sacrosanct. All of these are superstitions, and you're going to put everything on the same level. But the world applauded that. The world thought this was wonderful. So when you hear the applause of the world and the world praising, you kind of you become a little bit quiet.
Yeah.
Even though you're not in agreement, you watch it.
So okay, so now you've witnessed all of this go on, and then you've watched the Francis papacy happen, but you're still hopeful for this next conclave because I look at the men that are there and I'm just like, man, it is going to take divine intervention for us to get a Catholic as the next pope. Like, there's so many men there that aren't Catholic. They don't have the faith. Like, these are godless men who are concerned with the issues of the day, climate change and immigration, and they're very political men. And to me, they dress up in the garb of religiosity, but they're not speaking of the God we know. So to me, I see the Sanhedrin when I look at them, and I'm just begging God to be merciful to us and give us one of the few men there that actually do believe the Catholic faith.
If you're seeing the Sanhedrin when you're looking at many of these men, you're an optimist.
Oh man,
you're an optimist. Yeah. Look, here's the thing. I don't believe, I'm trying to be realistic, and I'm not trying to be a reactionary.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, I have never seen anything in the history of the church, and I know my church history pretty well. I've never seen anything in the last 2,000 years that compares to the last 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do I say that? And people will say, well, we had bad popes just a minute. We might have had morally bad men living morally bad lives. They did not contradict the Catholic faith.
Mm-hmm.
Their teaching was straight on. They didn't vary on that. I always use the example of this. Probably the Borgia popes have the fame of being the worst popes in the world. You have to be very careful of that, because that feeds into what we call the Black Legend.
Yep.
That the English during the Reformation, the English Reformation, really were anti-Spanish, anti-Catholic, and they created an awful lot of myths. But also, the Borgias were Spaniards, and they had the throne of Peter. They were hated in Italy because they were Spaniards. So history has not been nice to them, and a lot of things that we read about them were simply not true. But let's say they were. Alexander VI was Pope, a Borgia Pope. He was reputed to have had 7 or 9 illegitimate children, okay? A group of priests from southern Italy made a pilgrimage to Rome when they heard that the Borgia Pope was on the throne, and they knew his fame. They knew that he had lived let me just call it a loose lifestyle. Shall we put it that way? Right? They said, and these priests walked from southern Italy to Rome in a pilgrimage with their concubines and with their children, asking for a change in celibacy. This is in 1492.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Asking for a change in celibacy. They said, well, we've got the perfect man right now as Pope because he's living a wicked life. The Pope answered them, did not receive them when they arrived in Rome, but he sent a message to them. I'll take care of my sins. You take care of your sins.
Yeah.
I'm not changing the law of the church to accommodate my life. I'll answer for my sins before God. We're not changing the laws to make my life easier. That's not what this is about, right?
Yeah.
I take my hat off to such a man. I take my hat off to such a man. Also, there was an English martyr that I was just reading about, and I should be ashamed of myself for not remembering his name. A womanizer, an alcoholic during the time of Henry VIII in England.
Yes.
What was his name? You know?
I can't remember his name, but the quote that he says when he goes to his martyrdom is amazing. I'll let you say the quote, but it's amazing when he goes to his martyrdom. Yeah.
An adulterer, a womanizer, a fornicator, I have always been. A heretic, I have never been.
Yeah, and he's a saint.
That's it.
He's a saint. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a saint because he gave his life in testimony for that, for the truth.
Yeah, I can't remember. Rob, look
So
him up.
I guess what I'm saying, Anthony and Rob, there's hope for us.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to pray that with the office comes divine
Saint
grace.
Andrew Waters.
Yes, that's him.
There you go.
Yeah.
St. Andrew. That's right. St. Andrew.
Yeah, we have to pray that with the office comes, because we've seen that through church history where a crooked man winds up taking the papacy, but then some kind of grace gets conferred upon the man, and he doesn't after he becomes Pope. It's almost like, that opinion was me before that, but now we are the royal we, and I don't hold that opinion anymore. And that's
like
what we really
St. Thomas Becket,
right.
hopefully.
Yes.
That's
we
right.
do have a question from the audience here. You mentioned that Bunini was a Freemason, obviously, and he was responsible for the major liturgical reforms from the 50s, through the Novus Ordo. If we have a restoration, should we go back to something prior to everything he did, or how should we view the new Mass through the lens of what we know now about who made it?
Great question, and a logical one. I would say this. This is my opinion, okay? I'm giving you my opinion, which doesn't make it gospel. Let's be clear on that. As far as I'm concerned, there were certain things that should have changed. We do progress with time, and changes are made in things. The very fact that we have the Mass is because the Mass organically changed from its beginning. Things were added, things were taken away. It was codified in 1570 by Pope Pius V. Okay, but basically the Mass has been the same. The Catholic Mass has been the same for about 1,800 years, and some would say 1,900 years, right? It's been this form. Things come, things go, things change. We add, for example, we add saints to our calendar, right? Well, that's a change. That's a change, right? Good. So how do we change that? How do we accommodate? Fine. There's also, for example, every Sunday in the old calendar, there was the same gospel every year. Today, in the new Mass, we have a 3-year cycle. And so we get a little bit more of Scripture put in. I think that's refreshing. I think most priests agree with that. These are wonderful changes. What's not wonderful is having people skateboarding at the offertory, women dancing during the consecration, priests inventing this, doing hulas and shouting. No, this is insanity. This isn't change. This isn't good. We've lost a whole sense of the sacred. We've lost a whole sense of the sacred. I'm not saying that we have to go back to everything was perfect before. Everything was not perfect before. That's why they called the council. Everybody saw that there was a need for a little bit of dusting off, a new look at some things. For example, we never had until recently, the entire Mass was in Latin. Right? Now what I'm saying is, so were the readings. Now, what popes even before the council said, you can do the first reading in the gospel in the vernacular. Marvelous. Good. So people can understand it. This is what I'm saying by changes, right? It's not necessary to go back. What's necessary is to reform a proper reformation. And that can happen. There's some dusting off that needed to be done. It was done. It wasn't done. It was overdone. They threw out the baby with the bathwater. This is what I'm saying. This is what happened. Let me give you an example. We had one canon. What is the canon? The canon is the Mass after the Sanctus. Holy, holy, holy Lord God, right? After that, until the communion is finished, up to communion, that is the canon. Not one word of that was to be changed. The council said this. I didn't say this. The Vatican Council II said not one word of the Roman canon is to be changed.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? The last time you went to Mass, I'll bet you didn't hear the Roman canon. What did Bugnini do? Bugnini said, well, now just a minute. The council says that we can't change one word of the Roman canon. I know what we'll do. I'm going to invent 3 more canons.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got Eucharistic prayer number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And right? This is crazy. This isn't what the council said to do. And then he puts in all of these. And you know that I've just got to tell you this, because this to me is one of the most unbelievable things. I heard it myself from Father Louis Boyer. He worked with Bugnini in the creation of the new Mass. I heard him say this himself. He did a conversion in his life and came back to reality. But he reported this: the second Eucharistic prayer, this is the one that you hear every time you go to Mass. You know why you hear it? Because it's the shortest. Yeah. Not because it's the most beautiful, it's the shortest, right? Mm-hmm. You are holy indeed, Lord, the fountain of all holiness. Let your Spirit come upon these gifts to make them holy, so that they may become the body and blood, right? That's the second. That was written by Father Boyer. Now, be careful here. If you listen to Bugnini, when he presented this, he would tell you that this is the oldest canon of the Catholic Church. Yeah. We found this among the documents. This is the oldest, it's the most beautiful. Father Boyer finally confessed. He said, no, I was out to dinner one night in Trastevere at a pizza place, having a glass of wine with a consociate, and I got noticed that that my canon, this Eucharistic prayer, had to be on Bunini's desk at 10 o'clock the next morning. We wrote it out on a napkin in the restaurant. Right? Yeah. This is what we're using. Is that an organic development of the Mass? No. What's organic about that, except for the pizza sauce?
And even the receiving on the hand it's antiquarianism.
All of that is terrible.
It's just antiquarianism. It's like, oh, we found some statement from Justin Martyr who talks about this, but it's like it's just the reason that the church developed these things over time was because they knew that it would be the best for souls, and the liturgy that the church developed sustained civilization for 1960 years. So to just kind of overturn that is just insane. Like, yeah, you're right. There is room for maybe making people able to hear the gospel and the readings in the vernacular. Yes. But, you know, to just wholeheartedly just upend everything like that it must have been shocking for the people, especially the little ones, the devout little ones who just, you know, they would just go to Mass and then all of a sudden everything changed on them. It must have been such a hard thing.
Yeah, I've got to let me tell you something else too, Anthony, that was fantastic. Because of Catholic schools, we were 54 people in my classroom. Mm-hmm. 54 students. And one nun maintained order. 54, right? And believe me, we learned. Anybody who graduated from a Catholic school was 2 years ahead of public school kids.
Yeah.
We were taught, we had what was called the dialogue Mass. We were taught as children the answers to all of the responses in Latin.
Yeah.
So when we went to Mass and the priest said, Dominus vobiscum, we answered et cum spiritu tuo. Sursum corda, we answered, Habemus ad Dominum. We answered this.
Yeah.
This was our participation was fantastic. It wasn't that we were completely ignorant. We knew what was going on. Communion in the hand. This was a creation by Martin Luther. Don't let them tell you this is the early church. Martin Luther did this to ruin the idea that Catholic superstition of the real presence.
Yeah.
And it worked real well.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, they did a study, didn't they? 70% of American Catholics do not believe that host is the body of Christ. Well, congratulations. They were successful in their campaign.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted to do. You know this too. If you're married, you can tell me how much you love your wives. But if I see you in public mistreating her, calling her names, or paying no attention to her, you're not going to fool me that you love your wives. I see the way you treat her. Well, if we treat the Blessed Sacrament that way, filthy hands, pieces falling on the floor, we're walking on them. Anybody can give out communion. It's a hodgepodge, and we've done this, and we've done it for the purpose of taking away the sacred.
Yeah.
We have two directions on the cross, our symbol. Two directions. Horizontal and vertical. We're left with this.
Yeah.
Just vertical.
Man, it's so true. Okay, so to go back to the conclave that elects John Paul I. So he gets elected. Now he's only there for 30 days and then he dies. Now
33 days.
33 days. Now what because it's a very mysterious circumstance that happens with him. What do you think happened there?
First of all, why was he elected?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into my book, but it's in the book, and I don't want to get bogged down with detail. The election was between three men: Cardinal Siri of Genoa, Cardinal Sebastian Baggio of the Roman Curia, and Giovanni Benelli of the Secretary of State. When Benelli saw that Baggio was gaining in votes, Benelli threw his votes over to a neutral candidate by the name of Albino Luciani from Venice. He won. So Cardinal Benelli of Florence was the one who saved the day in that.
And he was
as soon as he won the election.
Friend and ally of Gagnon, right?
Yes. Yeah. These are the good guys. These are the good guys. And what I'm saying is, we had for a moment, for a while, we had a Freemason leading the race. Could you imagine actually electing a Freemason as Pope of Rome?
Yeah, I think it happened.
This is incredible. You don't have a real hard time imagining that, do you? No, we won't go into that. Let's steer away from that, shall we? I like having my head attached to my neck. But the point is this. The point is this. He won the election, Luciani. He's a good man. Let me start by this one. A man who, first of all, believed in God.
Yeah.
And had feared God in the proper sense of the word, to fear the Lord. The first thing he did was he asked Cardinal Benelli to be his Secretary of State. And Cardinal Benelli said yes, he agreed. As soon as you call in Cardinal Gagnon, who actually was Archbishop still at that time, Archbishop Gagnon, who just finished the 3-year investigation of the Roman Curia, that is, of your government, Holy Father, the people you've got who are surrounding you. You have to read his report, because there's some house cleaning needed to be done before we go any further. There's some people to say goodbye to, get them out of here and clean house. Well, the Pope, John Paul I, called in Gagnon. I know because I drove Gagnon to the audience. He went up and saw the Pope, handed him his entire study, the 3-year study on the Roman Curia, and came down very positive. We drove back home. He was elated with the audience, how it went, and the Pope took the documents and was studying them.
Yeah. He
finally came to this. He said, the Pope was a little bit timid. If he had one defect, it was he was shy. It's like all of us. Nobody wants confrontation. Yeah. No, we don't look for it. If it happens, okay, it happened, but you're not out looking for it. Those we call brutes. The brutes are out. Thugs are out doing that. Well, sometimes those subways can be brutal. Anyway, the Pope called in Gagnon. Gagnon gave him the study, and he began studying exactly what had to be done. He said to the Pope, John Paul I, called Benelli in Florence, said, "You're going to be my Secretary of State. You're going to come back to the Vatican and help me run this place." Yes. He said, "Why don't you get rid of Baggio? Why don't you get rid of Cardinal Baggio?" Baggio was in power. Believe me, he was in power. And Benelli said, "No, Holy Father, you have to do that.
Yeah.
You as Pope have to do that. That has to be the first thing that you do as an act that people can see, so they know where we're going, where this is going. You have to do that. I can't do that for you. You've got to do it." All right. Well, he tried getting an appointment with Baggio. Baggio refused to see him. He was busy constantly. Imagine telling the Pope that you're busy. Yeah. So no, I can't make it today. Sorry, I'm busy. I've got a ping pong lesson or something. Whatever he made up. It was incredible. Just an incredible man. Finally, the Pope said to him, "Look, I need to speak. We need to speak. When can you come?" He said, "Well, today is off." And he said, Then tonight. He said, "Well," he said, "don't tell me you're busy tonight. After 8 o'clock, you're busy? What are you doing after 8 o'clock? I'll wait for you here in my office at 8 o'clock. Well, Baggio arrived at 8 p.m. that night. They sat down and talked, and the Pope offered him, he said, "Leave the Congregation for Bishops, and you can take Venice. You can be Archbishop of Venice. Why was Venice free? Because that's where John Paul I came from. All right, so there's no archbishop in Venice. And also John Paul I had his own friends who were auxiliary bishops and the monsignors and all the secretaries. So Baggio would be there and under complete control. They could watch him. Baggio was furious, absolutely rejected the idea, said he was not leaving. They were shouting, as we know from the Swiss guards who reported it, standing outside the door. It's in the evening. Baggio left in a huff after about an hour talking. And the Pope was dead about 3 hours later.
Wow.
All right, now, I said to Cardinal Gagnon, I asked Cardinal Gagnon that next Sunday, the three of us went out walking. All of Rome was talking about the Pope being poisoned or being killed, or who did it. Well, only Cardinal Gagnon knew that the last person to talk to him was Baggio. And as a matter of fact, the only person who reported it was Time Magazine. Time Magazine of all the magazines reported that the last person to talk to him was Baggio. I said to Cardinal Gagnon, do you think that the Holy Father was murdered? And Gagnon said to me, he said, Charlie, there are many ways of killing a man. There are many ways to kill a man. You don't have to poison him, this, that, and the other thing. He said, if the man had a heart attack, he had a heart attack, which is believed that he had a heart attack. Who caused that? How was that caused? It was caused by somebody screaming back at him as Pope.
Yeah.
This is unheard of. All right, so we had a second election. The same thing happened again with the same three people in a stalemate. Cardinal Benelli of Florence again pulls another rabbit out of his hat and said, Wojtyła of Poland, I throw my votes to Wojtyła. He was elected. Finally, Wojtyła called in Gagnon. He said, all right, show me this study of 3 years. And Wojtyła told Gagnon that he wasn't thinking about making any changes soon. Whatever the reason, who knows, right? Who knows? If somebody's telling you that marauders are at your door and your wife and children are inside, you're not going to say, well, let me finish watching the football game and we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that's what he did, though. He did not act. He received Gagnon. I drove Gagnon to the audience, took Gagnon home, and when he came back after speaking to John Paul II, he said, what are you doing the day after tomorrow? I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to drive me to the airport. I quit. I'm out of here. I can't handle this. He said, let this go wherever it's going. Put me back into the jungles in Colombia, and I'll preach a devotion to the Sacred Heart. I've had it here. This is it.
Yeah,
but he told the Holy Father. He told the Holy Father three things. Right? He told the Holy Father three things. John Paul II, three things. One, you have a Freemason naming all of the bishops of the world, right under your nose. Secondly, the Vatican Bank is about to explode in a scandal because it's not being handled at all. And you've got a man who is an American at this time, Paul Marcinkus, who is not a bad and evil man, as many times he's presented. He was just an incompetent man for finances. Mm-hmm. He was giving letters of credit to strange people, very wealthy people, powerful. Letters of credit. In other words, he would say, with this letter of credit, you go to such and such a bank in Switzerland, and they'll give you $5 million, and we, the Vatican, will back that up.
Yeah.
Well, he did this to many people. All of those people were Freemasons.
Mm.
All of them were Freemasons. And they called all of those letters now. Well, it was to collapse the Vatican's finances. This is what the whole plot was. And that was done by the Freemasons of a lodge called Propaganda 2. Propaganda 2. That was the lodge. You can read all about that, and you can read all about that. It was horrific. But he said, and a third thing, Holy Father, there's a plot against your life. He said, and the Pope, I said, and what did the Pope say when you said there's a plot against his life going on? Gagnon said, he answered me, he said, who would want to kill the Pope?
Yeah.
That's it.
Gagnon
left. They shot the Pope. Of course, the Vatican Bank exploded, the whole scandal. They shot the Pope. He's in the hospital. Went through a whole trauma. I don't know how he survived. I do know how he survived. He survived by a New Yorker, a New York doctor by the name of Kevin Cahill. God bless him. Cardinal O'Connor from New York flew to Rome to save the life of John Paul II. The Italian doctors, I love Italians. Don't get me wrong. I love Italians. Their art is beautiful. Their love, their ideas, concepts of love is beautiful. Their music, their food is beautiful. Medicine is not one of the things I love about them.
Yeah.
Well, their doctors had given the Holy Father, when he was shot in the assassination attempt on May 13th, 1981, they gave him contaminated blood.
Mm.
So the Holy Father is not only dying of bullet wounds, he's now got hepatitis. I mean, they almost killed him.
Yeah.
Were it not for Kevin Cahill from New York, Dr. Kevin Cahill, who flew there, he would have died. He saved his life. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, when the Holy Father came to, after weeks in the hospital, they say, I wasn't there to hear it, but they say that the first words out of his mouth were, find Gagnon.
Yeah.
Find Archbishop Gagnon. Well, they searched all over the place, found him in Colombia, and brought him back to Rome. He made him a cardinal, and he got rid of Baggio. Finally, all right.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. But this is how close we came to the brink. To the brink.
Yeah. So you made an important point about John Paul I being a timid man and, not looking for conflict. And that's kind of what I even see going into this conclave. I see a lot of men. I do see a group of men who are holy and believe the Catholic faith, but they also seem very timid to me. And I'm just really wondering, in this coming conclave, do you think we will see one of those highlights of church history where things get a little hectic and, behind the scenes, they put their foot down? Or do you think these men are going to just go along with, after the past 12 years of seeing what the devastation caused in the church, do you think any of the men in there are going to do what is needed for the election of this next pope?
Anthony, I'm going to be very positive and say, yes, I do believe that, because I do. I believe that there are enough men in this conclave to make a remarkable change in the direction of the church. And I also believe that you haven't heard from them, because the majority of them are silent.
Mm-hmm.
We have one problem here that was created by Pope Francis, and he did this on purpose. There are so many voters that they don't know one another. No one knows anyone.
Mm-hmm.
This is so you're going to start the whole conclave in confusion.
Yeah.
You're starting like, who are you? Where do you come from? Who? He named cardinals in Cucamonga and in Timbuktu, where there's no Catholic population. There's no reason to have a cardinal. He wanted this. That's the way he wanted it. Well, this is the first problem, that these men get to know each other, right? What are your ideas? What is it? It takes a little bit of this. However, I think a lot of those men from around the world, especially men from Africa, cardinals from Africa, cardinals from Asia, some from Latin America, but you've got to be careful with Latin America, because you've got the theology of liberation, which is Marxism going on heavy there. But you've got good men there, but they're not men that shout. They're quiet. Some of them are very strong, but they're quiet. They keep their opinions to themselves. I think that most of them, I pray that most of them have the intelligence and the integrity to see that something has got to be done ASAP. It's got to be done now. It's got to be done. We cannot continue like this. I think they know that. And I'm praying they do. I'm praying they do. Can't do anything other than that. What else can be done?
Yeah,
and I wish I could tell you, oh, don't worry, lads. This guy's in and that one. Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Let's just, yeah.
But we have been surprised in 2,000 years.
That's how we'll have to all
We have
leave off,
received
right?
surprises.
We'll just have to.
That's
Well, the
it.
God of surprises we've heard much about for the past 12 years. So
Well, this may be one time when he's right.
yeah, let's see. Let's just pray for the God of surprises. Father Murr, thank you so much for your time. This was I always love hearing from the older guys who've lived through a lot of this, because a lot of us started taking our faith seriously within the past 12 years. I mean, I was a JP2 Catholic growing up. I loved Benedict. I mean, to go from those men to Francis was so devastating for me that I left the sacraments for a period of time. And by God's grace, I came back. And, you know, it's a scary time in the church for the faithful who really are pleading with God for a faithful man to get in that chair. So thank you so much for this.
I might be wrong, Anthony. I might be wrong, but I'll bet after you left the church for a while in this confusion, what brought you back was the notion that it's time for a good fight.
Yeah, it was part of it. That
well, congratulations, because you left and came back. I never left, and we're in the fighting. We're in the fighting game. It's time to clear up.
There's even like the Eastern Orthodox I'm watching online, and they're like, you know, they have a lot to say about Francis. And I said, do you not see how the whole world looks to the Pope of Rome? The whole world looks to the Pope. Nobody's worried about what bishop is in the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Pope of Rome controls the fate of the world, whether people know it or not. Where the church goes, so goes the world. The whole world is focused on this conclave right now because the Pope of Rome is the successor of Peter, and it's the most important institution in the history of the world. So, you know, everybody can come up with their own reasons for why they're in this group or that group. You know, people go sedevacantists, they go, whatever. You guys are all crazy. The devil is after the church because it is the bride of Christ, and this is the church he's making his assault on and making his attack on for a very specific reason. So we are in a battle for civilization right now. So yeah, we all need to hit our knees.
The devil is about divide and conquer. The Holy Ghost is about unity.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. Don't fall by the wayside. Don't be divided. Stick to what is true, and the truth is Jesus Christ. Christ didn't say, I know the truth. I can get you to the truth. He said, I am the truth. There's no way to the Father except through me. Come, be mine. That's what we've got to stick to.
All right. Father,
gentlemen,
thank you.
A distinct
so much.
pleasure it has been.
Yes,
thank you,
absolutely.
Father.
God love you, and keep up the good work. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Okay, Rob, take us out, brother.